Welcome to our next episode of Intuitive Insights with me, SomRa.
And Re'Zhae.
So, we are intuitive psychics, healers, and we have lots of cool stuff to share with you as always. And today we're going to talk about ghosts and entity attachments and things of that nature and how all of that's interfacing with people all the time and they don't even know it and what you can do about it, how it affects your health and of course your environment if there's such things in your environment. So, stay with us, and you're going to hear some interesting stories and other cool stuff. So, first of all, Re'Zhae is the one who has a lot more experience in seeing and perceiving ghosts growing up. My ability to see clairvoyantly kind of diminished a little bit during after about 5 years old, and then I regained it later on. And so, Roger, I'm going to turn over to you to share some of your stories about ghosts and entities you've seen and witnessed.
Okay, so I have a lot of experience with ghosts. I've been seeing them since I was telling my mom about them when I was like 2. So I've always been able to see things. So one of the times that really, really sticks out to me was when I was living in this apartment. There was, which we found out later from working with you, that there was a vortex in the property, like behind the apartment building. So that's why it was so active there. The one thing that happened a lot when I first moved there was this man that wore like 1800 style clothing. He had the black kind of like three-piece suit on. He had the hat on. He had a beard, and he would just stand at the end of my bed and stare at me. So
Wow.
every night, and I'd open my eyes and I'd see him there, and I pull the blanket up, and I'm like, no, let's count to 10. Move the blanket. He's still standing there, clear as day. It's like awesome. He's not going anywhere. So then I had to talk to you because I was still pretty young back then and figure out how to send him on to the light because he didn't have the greatest feeling about him. You know, some ghosts, you're like, okay, they could be okay to hang out for a little bit, but some of them have icky energy that you just don't want around. Well, this guy definitely had some of the very intense energy. Like the way he would just stare at you was like he was just looking through your soul. And I was like, okay, we got to get rid of this guy. So that's one of them. Another person that kind of hung out for a while there was a little girl. She was from the 50s, and she was really playful. And there was this antique car that was like a music box that somebody had given my brother, someone who had passed away. For whatever reason, it was in my room. And it would randomly just play very loudly without being touched. And my mom did not believe me. She's like, no, you're playing with it. You're playing with it. And then the bathroom was on the other side of my bedroom wall. And I was sitting in the corner across, all the way across as far as I could be from this car. And it started playing really, really loudly. And she opened the door and looked at it and looked at me. And I was like, I didn't touch it. I told you, like, this thing keeps playing on its own. It was that little girl. I ended up talking to her quite often before I ended up helping her and sending her on to the light because she was okay. So we let her hang out for a while, but she liked to play tricks on people. So that was interesting. Let's see, I had a lot of things that just went on at the apartment. And we also had a lot of antiques at the house. And before I knew how to like clear everything, it was like a full house. There was always something going on. Something going on. Let's see, anytime that I go somewhere that's like a historic place, so I'm more turned on, paying attention, than normal. Because even when I'm not paying attention, things will just happen and you'll notice it. But when we go to historic places, like when we went to Petersburg, there was people everywhere, especially in the one house that we walked into. There was just so much going on. Um, as we found out later, if you're into past lives, that we had a past life there. So I was like having flashbacks of things that had happened. Like it was super interesting. So anytime I've been anywhere, it's historic, and I love history. So I've been a lot of places. Any of the battlegrounds I've been to. I mean, even going to Graceland, Elvis's house. All kinds of places. Anywhere I've been there. The Peabody Motel in Memphis. My mom would always be like, "Oh, what do you see? What do you see?" And back then, I would just roll my eyes and be like, "Oh my gosh, why do you want to know?" But I would tell her as we go into places the stuff I was seeing. There was people. There was these 2 men that were in the back of this room, and there wasn't anything there, but it looked like they were playing pool. Like they were just going on about their business as they had been. So yeah, I've seen lots and lots of things everywhere, all over the place, and yeah, it's been interesting. And then I learned at one point that I could talk to them. So then, you go from there. You talk to them, figure out what they're doing, why they're hanging out, a little bit about their life, and then help them go on to the light.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And folks, stay with us because in this episode, before we end, we'll share things you can do. And when we say send them into the light, you don't necessarily have to have special talents to do that. You just need to know and have focus and release your fears over is helpful too. Because when I was first dealing with entities, mine was in the context of back in the 1990s when I was doing a lot of hands-on energy work and in-depth energy work where we get into different layers of the energy field inside the body, layers of light grids and filaments. There's more than just the Chinese meridians. And we would find entities actually were in people's fields and attached, often in places where there was pain or chronic problems. So we're going to talk about that too, and how a lot of health issues are caused or largely caused by that, what the circumstances are around that, and how you can release it, get it out of your field, or at least get help for that. Most people need help with that. It's because it's a little complicated sometimes. But Regine, that's really cool. I want to speak to a couple of points here. One is you mentioned a vortex. So was that particular place a vortex that I had perceived or someone else had, or you just knew it on that property?
I think we looked into it together because back then we were still trying to figure out like what was going on with me. I'm like, something's going on. Then you told me like, hey, that's a vortex, and I was like, okay, because that would explain why no matter how many times I clear this place, new people keep popping up. I was like, this is crazy.
I think it was a portal, right? Is that there's a
Is that
difference
what it
between a
was?
vortex.
Oh yeah, it was a portal. That's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we mean by that, folks, is I've also trained and highly experienced in clearing properties, even as big as battlefields and all kinds of things of entities and helping send them to the light. It's kind of a side job. It's not my primary thing, but it's something that got incorporated into my work. Number one, because I'm fascinated by it. I've got lots of past lives where I'm skilled at that. But also my clients, I was a body worker, energy worker for 30 years. Uh, I've found that when they were coming for help with their pain or certain emotional issues and things like that, that as I looked into it, there were entity issues involved, either in their home environment, attached to them, or both. And so I learned how to help them with that as well, and then resolve the health issue or the emotional issue or they don't feel safe in their home kind of stuff. And plus, in that whole journey, I was my spirit took me to different homes to stay in different homes, like house sitting and a series of experiences where every home had entities and issues that I was then, it was a crash course in learning to clear properties and just discover what's in homes and properties and vortexes, portals, there's all kinds of different things. And if you're interested in that, you can go to our website at joyousawakening.com, and you'll see a space in the menu bar for space clearing or something like that. Sometimes we change it up, but Re'Zhae's father, Duran, who's a channel, one of the beings who he channels, we work together as a team, and we have a collective team in the higher realms. And we do what we call multidimensional space clearing and optimization, optimizing the energies of your environment to support your evolution, your healing, and so forth. And if that's a service that you're interested in, go to the website and check that out. And there are links to sign up for that. So that was a lot of my experience. And so vortexes are just like that. They're spinning energies, columns of energy, and why they're there and all that. I'll get into that another time, perhaps. We have a podcast where we were interviewed. Duran and I were about that and our work in that field. But portals are basically like doorways between dimensions, and there are portals all over the place. And a lot of people have portals in their homes. A fourth dimensional portal, and this is where ghosts and entities exist. So these are lower dimensional beings. Meaning that they still have ego. They still have anger, fear, emotional energies like that. Once you get into fifth dimension and higher, that's oneness based consciousness. There's no more ego, and everyone is operating from a space of pure infinite love. So, what ghosts and entities are not souls. A lot of people confuse that. It's not the soul of the person, it's actually a fragment of the consciousness of the person they were in that prior life. And sometimes these beings are from other worlds and that sort of thing, but we'll just, for the sake of this conversation, we'll stick to earth, that they had a lifetime or several lifetimes here, and they look like that last lifetime, and often they died unexpectedly, and there's trauma around it. There's various reasons why that fragment is stuck, that fragment of consciousness is stuck. And so when you help beings into the light, or when you remove them from a person's field or attachments in their body, you're not only helping the person or the owner of the home, you're helping that entity move on. That soul on the higher realms needs that piece back in order to take their next steps. And it facilitates their healing. So it's beneficial all around. It's, from my perspective, it's never good to just leave ghosts around. It's like, oh yeah, that's our ghost. He hangs out in that room. Some people do that. It's like, no, no, that's not good energy. It's your home, it's your space, and that being needs to move on, even if it's a passed away relative. A lot of people feel like their relatives, even positive relatives, are hanging around, and that's a good thing. It's actually not. Nobody is supposed to have your mother, father, grandmother, whatever, hanging around your home forever, or hanging around you or overseeing your life. Your guides are actually much higher than that. They're not fragments of consciousness. Your guides are in the fifth dimension or higher. Your guides and angels are love based. These passed away relatives, it's okay if they pop in and out, but they're not meant to be anchored onto a property or a home, or certainly hovering over you wherever you go. And a lot of the healing work I did back in the 90s, the hands-on work, and I can still do it distantly too, people have sessions with me, was getting in touch with what's the reason behind that. And often, like, countless grandmothers, so many grandmothers attached to people's fields. And they were often the quote good grandmother, the grandmother who cared about them when they were a kid, the client. And like, say abuse was happening in the household, the child was neglected or dealing with various things, and so that grandmother could see it, but because she was a grandmother, she couldn't interfere because the parents had control of the situation. Often the parents were the abusers or the neglectors, obviously. And so after the grandmother dies, she stays around, or it could be a grandfather. I've seen that too. Stays around with the person well into their adulthood, and actually is trying to protect them from discomfort. And what that grandmother, grandfather, whomever does is actually interferes with that person's growth. They need certain experiences to grow through and to heal. And that grandmother, grandfather, whomever is interfering with that, and that's not a good thing. And so when we find that there's discussion, and the work that Re'Zhae and I do, we've gotten into that some, where, we talk to that being and what's the situation. In the work that I do with Duran and the being that he channels, Kodamba, the higher ascended master, who we do this work, we talk with the being, see the situation, help them move on, and help the client understand that it's time to let go of this. And often, like, particularly healing clients, I have recommended that they do a ceremony, some sort of closing ceremony and dedication to that relative, thank them for what they've done in their life, and tell them it's time to move on. And it's a very loving thing. Like, sometimes I can't just remove that entity attachment because there's something inside the client that needs to shift. Is there anything you want to share about that, Re'Zhae?
So I was thinking while you were talking about that and all the people that we've worked with, and sometimes people just want to talk to their loved one before they send them on, and that's possible too. Because I do talk to ghosts, so I can talk to your loved one and let you know whatever you want to know from them before you send them on. And some people think that once you send them to light, they're just gone forever, and it's not that either. Like, you'll still be able to feel them. There'll still be times where they're going to be around, but not just constantly stuck with you at all times, because that's just holding you both up, and that's not good.
Absolutely. And when they do move on to the light, they go through a healing process. They go through a life review, things that quote should have happened when they died, but didn't. They've been kind of stuck in this in between realm, and they go through what they need to. So when they come back, pop in occasionally, it's usually a few months later, it could be years depending on the situation. That relative has evolved. They're much greater, they're much more light, and they've healed some things. And so it's just sometimes they're popping in to say hi or something like that. Right, Re'Zhae?
Yeah, yeah.
So switching gears a little bit on that, we do find in our work, mine and Re'Zhae's work, and by the way, she's awesome at talking in very detail with the ghosts and entities as needed, and she can even share with you what they were thinking at the time of when they were alive, if there's certain unresolved incidences, mysteries. We've helped people solve mysteries, and like why that relative died young or different things like that, or even help people connect with things in this world to further along something that happens here. It's a bit complicated to explain some of those issues, but it's been really beautiful to see some things that have unfolded. So sometimes when we get into this work, obviously we've mentioned we do trauma work. That's a lot of our focus because so many people have buried trauma or buried unresolved incidences with emotional charges and limiting beliefs. And so that's our goal, is always personal and spiritual growth, helping people with that. And so when we go into that space and discover that that person's has abuse, particularly sexual abuse or something else along those lines, psychological abuse, um, we, Re'Zhae and I, as we're doing the work, sometimes we experience a kind of psychic attack, as we call it, or something like that, where that passed away relative, usually they're passed away, is trying to interfere and stop us from accessing the truth. And we're all about the truth. Let's bring the truth forward so healing can happen. We're here to help our clients. And so we have things that we do to prevent that and help send that being on and that sort of thing. But it's an unusually, well, I don't know if it's unusual, but it's a significant amount of times where that happens. And in my first spiritual teacher in her classes, she talked about there's always family secrets. And growing up, everyone grows up in some sort of family secret that, or more than one, that everybody in the family is supposed to keep quiet about. Daddy's alcoholism, mother's neuroses, whatever it may be. And a lot of times it's abuse. And a child doesn't necessarily know they're being abused. They just know there's this awful, icky thing that happens. They get it over with and then they block it out of their memory. Says they got to keep going, they got to go to school, they got to be in that environment, and so you just forget about it over time, but it's all still there. So what we do when we're helping people with this stuff is we help find those puzzle pieces so that you can resolve them and then move on, because they are holding you back. And these things are very real and they do exist, including the parent or the other type of abuser. We've seen uncles, um, just different people like that from beyond, from the fourth dimension, trying to interfere as we're getting to the truth, which is evidence we're onto something, right, Re'Zhae?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Not that we have any doubt, because we know, we can see it, we can feel it. And so we're just kind of bringing that to your attention, those of you listening, that these things are very real. They exist. They're very common. And a lot of times, abusers are actually so-called normal. They appear normal. In other words, they could even be nice. They could have paid for your college and done all kinds of nice things for you, but then there's a part of them that has this dysfunction and does this thing, which often is some sort of sexual abuse, and that they are taking out on their child. And it's not always violent. It can be, coercive. It can be as a game. It can be all kinds of stuff. But when that person dies, they think it's buried with them. And as our client is attempting to heal, we're going to find that stuff so that we can help them heal. Is there anything you want to comment about that, Re'Zhae?
Yeah, so just not only is it somebody that's passed on, sometimes people that are still around, their energy is still trying to block things. So we know how to go around that as well. But it seems like they don't want you to know, and they don't want you. It's like sometimes it's like they don't want other people to know, but other times it's like they don't want you to know the truth because they don't want you to change how you feel about them. At least for the nice ones. The ones that are mean, they don't really care, how you feel about them. But the nice ones, it's like, I did this out of love. I don't want you to think of this any differently. But yeah, people have their issues, and even if things were done in a nice way, it still affects you. And you'd be surprised how many times we go in and find that.
Yeah. And it's still not right what they did to you. And if you listening do have actual memories of this, or you kind of have glimpses or things like that, what one of the most common things we see, particularly with sexual abuse, but any kind of abuse, is I'm the belief deep down in their core, our clients were helping them with, is that I must have done something wrong or something to deserve this. And because it is uncomfortable, even if that parent or other abuser perpetrator made it a game or made it playful or things like that, the child self knows it's wrong, and it's not a free will. And often, not often, but sometimes we see that the child self and that this belief is taken on to adulthood. It's like, well, he was nice about it, or she was, didn't really hurt me, or things like it. That's all psychological twisting that you did as a child to cope with what you knew in your core, and your authentic core was not right and not okay and not normal. Sometimes we see, beliefs like maybe I attracted it, I wanted the attention, and therefore it's my fault. All of this stuff is psychological twisting. That's not true. A child is working with whatever they can psychologically. So this episode isn't specifically about sexual abuse, but it is intertwined because we find this a lot. And when we're dealing with this sort of thing, and then ghosts and entities come in, and relatives trying to interfere. So we know what to do to deal with that, and to help free you of that. And so just know that there's help available. And we've got links below if you want to get a session with us and see if we can help you with whatever's going on around that. You mentioned too, Roger, about going to historical places. We talked about that in our early sessions as well. Yeah, I'm the same way, and I forget. I'm psyched about history. I love going to historical places, and then when I'm there, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Entities are trying to, like, they know that I can feel
Yeah.
them and hear them, and they're like, hey, can you help me with this? Hey, blah blah blah. And often it's trauma. It's like, something, there's something unresolved and sorrow or something like that that they're wanting help with, and I'm like, I'm off duty. But I'm never
I
off
don't
duty.
know. It can be overwhelming at times, but sometimes it's fun to go into it. But I think the last time that I went to Gettysburg, I was like, okay, everybody, you're just gonna have to leave me alone for a little bit. Let me try to enjoy this and do some reading and take everything in, and then we'll see if I can work with some people here. It's
Yeah.
just it's crazy to see all of that. It's really interesting as well, though, and to get the different stories. When you do talk to people, sometimes it's to know what happened in their world and everything. Very different times.
Yeah, and we find a lot of times, the history books are not accurate. Many things in the history books are the real truth is twisted, right, and
That's
varied,
a
and
whole
so
other story.
yeah, that's a whole other story. We will do an episode on that because I have lots of history around the Civil War, American Civil War, and the American Revolution War. I was there in other lifetimes, and I've had the memories come back, and as well as I've gone to some of these sites, historical sites, and been called upon by the divine to help many of these soldiers and even generals and various ranks, help them heal from grief, particularly on the side that didn't officially win, and just all kinds of, I mean, but dying unexpectedly. Almost everybody who goes into war, it's like, we're gonna win, yeah, boom, boom, and then boom, you're dead. And it's like a shock. And so helping them with that and some of the deeper issues, and yeah, hearing their stories. I actually did therapy on a lot of soldiers during a particular time period, so maybe we'll do an episode in this podcast or another one on that, because that's fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. So yeah, I went to a radio museum a few months ago, and there it was again. There were like four entities in this museum that were stuck to their radios. It's historical radios, and it was like, okay, time to send you onto the light. And so we're kind of on duty all the time in a way. But yeah, I sometimes I'll do that. Okay, I'm here for me right now. I'll help you later, and actually book time to set aside and help these beings sometimes afterwards. But there's only so much time, and we don't get paid for that work.
Right.
We still got to make a living. So, but it is interesting and it's meaningful. So, anything else you want to share about any of that, Roger?
I was just thinking when you were talking about it, I remember the time when you were helping all those soldiers, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of work. But if you were to like try to help every single one that you came in contact with, then we'd never get anything else done. There's just so
No,
much going on.
there's so much. There's so many beings walking this planet, folks, in the fourth dimensional state that are unresolved, that are carrying pain, that are carrying grief, anger, and so forth, and conflict that need help. And we're certainly not the only ones. There are many people who do this work, and it's not just it's not parapsychology and we're just like studying, ooh, that's interesting. We're actually literally helping people through therapeutic means, helping these beings. They're just as real as you are. They're just in a slight out of phase dimensional state, fourth dimensional state. And yeah, there's a whole lot we can talk about that. And I did, after working with several of the soldiers and generals, it was like, okay, how can I help everybody at once? And I pulled in my techniques where I help physical people in 3D heal things, heal a lot of things at once, and applied it to these massive groups of soldiers, and that ended up being very effective. And it was deeply meaningful to my heart to help shift that whole energy around these particular wars and so forth. So again, that's a side job. Only got so much time. Don't really get paid for it. So we just do the best we can with the time we have. So I did say we were going to share some techniques. So before we conclude today, here's some things y'all can do. Those of you listening, it doesn't take a lot of skill necessarily. You know, many of you maybe have some religious background where you've learned prayer and things like that. Maybe you work with a particular, like Jesus or someone, and help. Those certainly fine. Jesus is an ascended master, and he's happy to help. But there are lots of ways you can do it. Simply calling on the angels, particularly Archangel Michael, who is widely known, and he's the one known for clearing spaces, providing protection, particularly if you feel uncomfortable in that moment. It's like you can just call on Archangel Michael, like, Archangel Michael, please surround me in your protective light. I'm feeling unsafe right now. Help me to feel calm. And boy, back in the day, I mean, I just would instantly feel his support. And it may take a few times, till you get comfortable. You don't necessarily have to believe. You just need to be open in your heart. And sometimes when we're afraid, we're open to, stretching beyond what we think. Did you have something to share, Renee?
I would say Archangel Michael always helps us. My go-to whenever something's going on. It's like, okay, so that helps me be calm and be able to assess the situation and think about my next steps. And I was also thinking about working with one of our clients, and they were Christian. And, we were in the middle of the session. They're like, wow, Jesus is here. And I was just surprised. I was just like, okay, all right. So we're rolling with this. Jesus is here to support. So let's go with it. See what he's got to say. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I had a few Christian clients back in the day. Some we may still have some come here and there. As long as you're open minded beyond just what the dogma teaches, there's a lot we can share with you and help you and actually deepen your relationship with Jesus if that's important to you. But yeah, he does show up with people who he is important to, that they have a heart connection with a lot of times, and he's a really cool being. And so I'm like, yeah, I mean, he's not somebody that I worked with originally, but now, sure, bring in whoever in the team wants to help with this process. So also, you can call on Archangel Michael to remove that entity from your space, and or wherever you are, like say you're at a historical site or something. And there are lots of ways to do it. There's lots of books on it. You can probably find something online, if you do a search, Archangel Michael clearing space or something like that can give you more information. But basically, Unless it's a complex situation where you need to hire professionals like me and Jerron to help you with that, because sometimes it's more complex than just calling on Archangel Michael and it's gone. Certainly, just smudging and things like that won't do it in more complex situations. And complex meaning maybe there's more beings involved. The reason the being's there needs to be sorted out and all of that before the entity will actually let go and move on. But one of my favorite go-tos is the vortex of light. So when we talk about send them into the light, so I often say, Archangel Michael, please open a vortex of light above this space and draw out any energies or entities that are not directly lovingly supportive of my well-being here now. And or I speak that on the behalf of the client. And right away, this huge vortex opens up over the space, and it's like a suction, and it just gently sucks up anything that's ready to go. So if you want to try that on, go for it, folks. And like I said, do some research, and you will find various techniques and find the one that works for you. But you don't have to live with that. You don't have to live with entities in your house. It's not a good thing. They have lower energies. Even if it's a relative you're fond of, they need to move on and you need to move on. So I really encourage you to explore that and just there's lots of help for that because nothing is stuck. Okay, is there anything else you want to share before we conclude, Re'Zhae?
Not right now. That seems like, we've covered a lot of the bases right now.
Awesome. Okay. Well, if we have more stories, folks, we can do another episode. And again, check out the links below. We have lots of great services on our site. You can get our mailing list and you can be notified of events and different things like that. You get some free ebooks. And we're a team. We're here to support you in your advancing your evolution and easing your journey here in any way we can. So thank you for listening, for watching. We appreciate you and we send you lots of love and light.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.